You know, there's something most people don't realize about the flowers sitting on their windowsill or blooming in their garden right now. Behind those beautiful petals and sweet fragrances, some flowers carry energies that could be quietly disrupting the peace and harmony in your home. And I'm not just talking about superstition here, I'm talking about centuries of wisdom passed down through generations, observations made by masters who understood the subtle ways that nature interacts with our living spaces. Hello, my friend. My name is Grandmaster Lin, and I've spent more than 3 decades of my life studying and practicing the ancient art of Feng Shui. Over these 30 years, I've walked through thousands of homes, studied countless traditional texts, and witnessed firsthand how the energy of plants and flowers can shape the atmosphere of a household. What I've learned has sometimes surprised me, sometimes confirmed old suspicions, but always deepened my respect for the invisible forces that surround us every single day. Now I know what you might be thinking. They're just flowers, right? How could something so innocent, so natural, possibly cause any harm? Well, here's the thing. Flowers aren't just decorative objects. They're living entities that interact with the energy field of your home in ways that go far beyond what meets the eye. Some flowers radiate vibrant, life-affirming energy that lifts the spirit and attracts good fortune. Others, however, carry a different kind of vibration, a heavier, more somber frequency that can actually create energetic imbalances in your living space. Think about it like this. Every object in your home has a certain frequency, a certain energetic signature. When you bring something new into your space, it doesn't just sit there neutrally, it begins to interact with everything else. It contributes to the overall feeling of the room. And flowers, being living things with their own life cycles and symbolic meanings built up over centuries of human culture, they carry particularly strong energetic imprints. Some of these flowers have been used for so long in funerals, in mourning rituals, in ceremonies for the dead, that they've absorbed those associations. They've become energetic symbols of endings, of sorrow, of the boundary between our world and the next. And when you place those symbols in your home, especially in key areas where energy flows most strongly, you're essentially inviting that heavy, melancholic energy to take up residence alongside you. Over the years, I've heard so many stories from people who brought home a particular type of flower and within just a few days started noticing changes in their household. Arguments that seemed to come out of nowhere, trouble sleeping even though nothing else in their routine had changed. A general sense of unease or heaviness that they couldn't quite explain. Projects at work that suddenly stalled, financial opportunities that mysteriously fell through. And when we traced back what had changed in their environment, time and again we found these specific flowers sitting right there in the living room or bedroom, quietly influencing the energy field. Now, before we dive into the specific flowers I want to talk about today, I'd like to invite you to participate in something with me. Right now, wherever you are, take a moment and leave a comment with a positive affirmation. Something like, "I am ready to cleanse my living space and welcome peaceful, harmonious energy into my home." Or perhaps, "I choose awareness and wisdom in creating my living environment." Whatever words resonate with you, because here's what I've learned over 3 decades of practice. Setting an intention, speaking it out loud or writing it down, that act itself begins to shift energy. You're making a conscious choice to be aware, to take responsibility for your space, to actively participate in creating the kind of home you want to live in. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Because what I share on this channel isn't just abstract theory. It's practical wisdom you can apply today, right now, to create more peace, more stability, more flow in your everyday life. Each video is designed to give you actionable knowledge rooted in tradition, but made relevant for modern living. Alright, so let's get into it. Let's talk about these 10 specific flowers that ancient wisdom has always cautioned against keeping indoors. These are flowers that, despite their beauty, carry energies that can attract heaviness, disrupt the natural balance of your home, and potentially even open doors to influences you'd rather keep outside. I'm going to take you through each one, explain why it's considered problematic, what effects it might have, and what you can do if you already have these flowers in your home. If this video resonated with you and you found these prosperity secrets valuable, I would be truly grateful if you could take a moment to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps me continue sharing these ancient wisdom teachings with more people who are ready to welcome abundance into their lives. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know if you're planning to bring a prosperity plant into your home, or share which tip you found most helpful. Your engagement means the world to me and helps this knowledge reach those who need it most. Number 1. Yellow chrysanthemum. Let's start with yellow chrysanthemums. Now you might be thinking, but yellow is such a happy, bright color. It's the color of sunshine, of gold, of prosperity, and you're absolutely right about that in many contexts. But when it comes to yellow chrysanthemums, the story is quite different. This is one of those cases where centuries of cultural association have fundamentally changed the energetic signature of a flower. Walk through any cemetery in Japan, China, Vietnam, or many other East Asian countries, and you'll see yellow chrysanthemums everywhere. They're the traditional funeral flower. They sit on altars dedicated to the deceased. They're brought to grave sites as offerings to ancestors who have passed on. Generation after generation has used these flowers specifically to honor the dead, to mark the boundary between life and death, to symbolize the journey of the soul into the afterlife. Now, this doesn't mean there's anything inherently wrong with the flower itself. In nature, it's just a plant. But here's what happens over time. When millions of people across centuries consistently use the same flower in the same context for the same purpose, that flower begins to carry the energetic imprint of that purpose. It becomes a symbol not just intellectually, but energetically. The yellow of a chrysanthemum is no longer just any yellow. It becomes specifically the yellow of farewell, of endings, of the separation between worlds. In Feng Shui terms, we would say that yellow chrysanthemums carry very strong yin energy. Now, yin energy isn't bad in itself. We need yin energy. It's the receptive, quiet, restful aspect of existence. The problem comes when yin energy becomes too dominant in a space that's meant for living, for activity, for the dynamic flow of daily life. Your home needs to be primarily a yang space, vibrant and alive, full of movement and interaction and growth. When you bring strongly yin objects like yellow chrysanthemums into that space, you're essentially trying to mix two incompatible energies. Think of it like trying to have a joyful birthday celebration while someone in the corner plays a funeral dirge. The music itself might be beautiful, might even be appropriate in another context, but in this setting, it creates a jarring disconnect. It brings the energy down. It makes people uncomfortable even if they can't quite articulate why. I've had clients tell me that after they placed a large arrangement of yellow chrysanthemums in their living room, they started noticing that family gatherings felt different. Conversations that used to flow easily became stilted. People didn't seem to want to linger. There was an underlying sadness in the air that nobody could explain. Children who used to play energetically in that room suddenly preferred to be elsewhere. And when we removed the flowers and replaced them with something carrying lighter, more vibrant energy, the shift was almost immediate. People started smiling more, talking more. The whole space just felt alive again. And here's something interesting that happens on a more subtle emotional level. When you're surrounded by symbols of ending and farewell day after day, even if you're not consciously thinking about it, your subconscious mind is absorbing that message. You might start feeling less motivated. Projects you were excited about might lose their appeal. Small disagreements with family members can somehow escalate into major conflicts because the underlying energy of the space is already heavy and sad. So what's my advice here? Am I saying you should never have yellow chrysanthemums? Not exactly. Context matters. If you're observing a traditional festival where honoring ancestors is appropriate, if you're visiting a cemetery to pay respects, yellow chrysanthemums are perfectly suitable. They serve their purpose in that context. But as a permanent fixture in your living room or bedroom, that's where the problem lies. You're inviting a guest into your home who was only meant to visit temporarily for a specific occasion, and you're asking them to stay indefinitely. If you're someone who runs a business or works from home, yellow chrysanthemums can be particularly problematic. In Feng Shui, we pay very close attention to the flow of prosperity energy, what we call wealth qi. This energy needs to move freely, to circulate, to gather in certain areas. Yellow chrysanthemums have a tendency to block or slow down this flow. I've seen cases where business owners placed these flowers near their entrance or in their office, and they started noticing that clients who used to come regularly suddenly stopped showing up. Deals that should have closed fell through for no apparent reason. The money that used to flow in steadily just seemed to dry up. Number 2. Camellia. Now let's talk about camellias. These are flowers that possess a very particular kind of beauty. There's something almost aristocratic about them. Where a rose might be bold and passionate, a camellia is refined and reserved. It has this smooth, perfect elegance that can be absolutely captivating. But that same cool elegance also carries with it an energy that's worth understanding before you bring it into your home. If you love chrysanthemums and you want to keep them in your life, consider choosing white or pink varieties instead. These don't carry the same heavy associations. Or if you absolutely must have yellow chrysanthemums, keep them outside in the garden where their energy can dissipate into the larger environment rather than concentrating inside your home. But inside, in the spaces where you live and sleep and gather with family, I strongly recommend choosing flowers with a lighter, more life-affirming energy. If you've studied the natural habitat of camellias, you'll notice they tend to thrive in shaded, cool areas. In many regions, you'll find them growing near old cemeteries, along forgotten pathways, in places where people don't often walk. Now there's a botanical reason for this. They prefer cooler temperatures and indirect light. But over time, this preference for shadowy, secluded spaces has created an association in the collective consciousness. Camellias have become linked with solitude, with places between worlds, with the kind of quietness that borders on emptiness. There's one particular characteristic of camellias that has always made people uneasy, and once you know about it, you'll understand why this flower has such a complicated reputation. Unlike most flowers that shed their petals gradually, one or two at a time, camellias drop their entire bloom all at once. One moment you have this perfect, beautiful flower, and the next moment the whole thing has fallen to the ground intact. It happens suddenly without warning, with a heaviness that's almost startling. In Japanese culture, this way of falling has given camellias a very specific and rather dark symbolism. The sudden, complete drop of the flower head has been compared to the way a head separates from a body. I know that sounds quite morbid, but this comparison has deep historical roots. During the era of samurai, camellias were considered unlucky flowers to have around because of this association. Warriors believed that having camellias nearby could be an omen of a violent end. Whether you believe in omens or not, the point is that this symbolic meaning has become so deeply embedded in the cultural consciousness that it affects the energetic signature of the flower itself. From a Feng Shui perspective, what concerns me most about camellias is their tendency to freeze energy flow. Energy in a healthy home should circulate smoothly, like a gentle stream flowing through and around obstacles. It should move from room to room, rise and fall in natural rhythms, create pockets of vibrant activity and restful calm as appropriate. Camellias tend to interrupt this flow. They create what we might call cold spots energetically, places where energy slows down dramatically or stops moving altogether. When this happens near a bedroom, the effects can be quite noticeable. People report trouble falling asleep despite being tired. They wake up frequently during the night. Their dreams become unusually vivid or unsettling. Some describe a feeling of heaviness on their chest while sleeping, as if something were pressing down on them. Others report waking up feeling more exhausted than when they went to bed, as if they'd been struggling all night even though they don't remember doing so. I had one client who planted a beautiful camellia bush right outside their bedroom window. Within a week, both she and her husband started having trouble sleeping. They'd wake up around 3 in the morning, that time when yin energy is at its strongest, and feel distinctly uncomfortable, cold, even though the temperature hadn't changed. Uneasy, though they couldn't say why. Their young daughter, whose room was on the other side of the house, slept fine, but both parents in the bedroom nearest the camellia were affected. When we moved the plant to the back corner of the property, far from the main living areas, their sleep problems resolved within a few days. Now, does this mean camellias are evil flowers that must be banned from every property? Of course not. Like everything in Feng Shui, it's about appropriate placement. Camellias have their place in the world. If you have a large property, planting them in a far corner, well away from the main house, can be fine. The energy dissipates over distance. Or if you have a dedicated meditation space, somewhere you go specifically to be quiet and turn inward, camellias might actually support that purpose because of their still, yin nature. But near your front entrance, where energy needs to flow freely in and out, near bedrooms where people need restful but not stagnant sleep, near family gathering areas where you want warmth and connection, those are not appropriate places for camellias. The energy they carry is simply too cool, too still, too much like a pause button in spaces that need to stay active and flowing. There's also an emotional component to camellia energy that's worth understanding. The strong yin nature of these flowers can affect relationships within the household. I've heard this pattern many times over the years. A family plants camellias near their entrance or main living areas, and within a few weeks they notice that conversations have become more difficult. Spouses who normally communicate well start misunderstanding each other. Small irritations that would usually be overlooked become sources of real conflict. Children become more withdrawn, spending more time alone in their rooms instead of engaging with the family. Lilacs are fascinating flowers when you look at them through the lens of traditional wisdom and folklore. In certain parts of old Europe, particularly around ancient monasteries and historic cemeteries, lilacs grew abundantly, and over time, stories began to accumulate around these beautiful purple blooms. They were sometimes called soul-calling flowers, plants that were said to help guide spirits who had not yet found their final rest. If you love the look of camellias and want something similar but energetically safer, consider gardenias instead. They have a somewhat similar appearance but carry much lighter energy. Or look into peonies, which have that same lush, full bloom aesthetic, but with a much more vibrant, life-affirming energy signature. Number 3, lilac. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not claiming that lilacs literally summon ghosts or that having them in your garden is going to result in paranormal activity. But what these old stories reflect is a deeper understanding of the kind of energy that lilacs carry. They represent a particular quality of consciousness, a state of being that's between things, neither fully here nor fully there. And that in-between energy is what makes them problematic for daily living spaces. The color purple itself is significant in traditional metaphysics. In the system of 5 elements that forms the foundation of Feng Shui theory, purple represents the fire element, but not vibrant, active fire. Rather, it represents fire at the end of its cycle. The embers, the fading glow, that last bit of warmth before everything goes cold. It's a transitional color. Neither hot nor cool, neither active nor passive, but somewhere suspended between states. Combine that transitional color with the intensely sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance of lilacs, and you get a flower that creates a very specific kind of atmosphere. It's dreamy, yes, romantic certainly, but also somewhat disorienting. It can make a space feel as if you're half awake and half asleep, not quite grounded in present reality. And that's fine for a brief encounter, maybe walking through a garden on a spring afternoon. But as a constant presence in your home where you need to stay focused, alert, and emotionally grounded, that's where issues can arise. I've had numerous conversations with families who kept lilac arrangements inside their homes, and the stories are remarkably consistent. People describe feeling foggy-headed, having difficulty concentrating on tasks that normally wouldn't be challenging, experiencing unexpected waves of sadness or melancholy for no apparent reason, feeling emotionally sensitive in ways that seem out of proportion to what's actually happening around them. One woman I worked with kept fresh lilacs on her dining table for weeks during the spring season. She loved the scent, loved the way they brightened the room visually, but she started noticing that family dinners, which used to be enjoyable times of connection, were becoming tense. Small comments that should have been harmless were being taken the wrong way. People were snapping at each other. Conversations that started out pleasant would somehow turn sour. When we traced back the timeline, these issues started almost exactly when the lilacs appeared and resolved shortly after they were removed. From an energetic standpoint, what's happening is that the heavy yin nature of lilacs, combined with their transitional purple color and disorienting fragrance, creates an atmosphere where people's normal emotional defenses become weakened. The boundaries that usually help us regulate our reactions, filter our words, and maintain our composure become more permeable. As a result, sharper words slip out more easily. Hearts feel more vulnerable and more easily wounded. Conflicts that could have been resolved with a simple conversation escalate into real emotional ruptures. In ancient Feng Shui texts, there's a principle that states when yin energy dominates a space, the speech of residents becomes more cutting and their hearts become cooler toward one another. This isn't meant to be taken as a literal supernatural effect, but rather as an observation about how environmental energy influences human behavior. When the atmosphere of a home is heavy, cool, and dominated by downward flowing energy, people naturally become more negative in their interactions. There's also something that happens with lilacs, specifically at night. As the sun goes down and natural yang energy decreases, yin energy rises. Flowers like lilacs that are already heavily yin in nature become even more so. Their fragrance can actually intensify in the evening hours, and with it, the sense of something being slightly off, slightly not quite right. Some people describe hearing faint sounds that they can't identify, catching movement in their peripheral vision that isn't there when they look directly, feeling as if someone is watching them even though they're alone. Now, I don't jump immediately to supernatural explanations for these experiences. What I understand from decades of working with energy is that when a space becomes too heavily yin, our nervous systems become more sensitive. Our threshold for noticing subtle stimuli decreases. We pick up on small sounds, slight movements, changes in air pressure, things that are always present but that we normally filter out. In a balanced environment, our minds automatically ignore these minor disturbances. But in an unbalanced, overly yin environment, suddenly we're noticing everything, and it can feel quite unsettling. So should you avoid lilacs entirely? Not necessarily. Like camellias, the answer is about appropriate context. If you have a dedicated quiet space, somewhere you go specifically for reflection, meditation, or emotional processing, lilacs might actually be supportive there. Their dreamy, boundary-dissolving quality could be useful for those purposes. But in your main living areas, in family gathering spaces, in bedrooms where you need clear, restorative sleep, they're not appropriate. The energy they create is simply too uncertain, too transitional, too ungrounded. If you love purple flowers and want to keep that color in your home, consider irises or wisteria outdoors instead. These carry lighter, clearer energy while still providing beautiful purple blooms, or move toward colors that support the energy you want to create. Warm yellows and oranges for vitality and creativity, pinks for warmth and affection, whites for clarity and new beginnings. Number 4. Poppy. Poppies are one of those flowers that capture attention immediately. They're bold, they're vibrant, they're absolutely stunning when they're in full bloom, that intense red color, those delicate yet somehow also dramatic petals. There's something almost hypnotic about them. But beauty alone doesn't determine whether something belongs in your home. In fact, some of the most beautiful things in nature carry energies that are completely unsuitable for living spaces. And poppies are a perfect example of this. The symbolism of poppies varies dramatically depending on which cultural tradition you're looking at, but in almost every case, it's a symbolism that involves some form of darkness, loss, or danger. In Western cultures, particularly in Europe and North America, poppies are most strongly associated with remembrance of war dead. You see them every year around Remembrance Day or Veterans Day, those simple red poppies pinned to lapels, worn in honor of soldiers who died in conflict. They represent sacrifice, yes, but also the sorrow of loss, the tragedy of young lives cut short, the grief that war leaves in its wake. In Eastern cultures, the association is different but equally dark. Poppies are connected with opium, the addictive substance derived from certain poppy species that caused immense suffering throughout Asian history. The opium trade brought down empires, destroyed families, and created cycles of addiction and poverty that lasted for generations. Even though most ornamental poppies aren't the opium-producing variety, the symbolic association remains strong. Poppies represent temptation, forgetfulness, the dangerous allure of escape from reality. From a Feng Shui perspective, what concerns me most about poppies is the contradiction in their energy. On the surface, they appear delicate and graceful, that thin stem, those paper-like petals, there's a fragility that seems innocent enough. But beneath that gentle exterior, poppies carry what I would describe as soft yet toxic yin energy. It's the kind of energy that doesn't announce itself loudly, doesn't hit you over the head with obvious negativity. Instead, it works subtly, gradually creating effects that creep up on you so slowly that you might not even notice the connection. What poppies tend to do in a space is create what we call dead zones or stagnant pools of energy. These are areas where qi, life force energy, stops moving. It doesn't flow around obstacles like a healthy stream would. It doesn't circulate and refresh itself. Instead, it just sits there, becoming increasingly heavy and depleted over time. When these dead zones form near areas where people sleep or spend a lot of time, those people can actually feel their vitality being slowly drained away. The symptoms of this are very ordinary, which is what makes it so insidious. You might just feel tired a lot, not acutely exhausted like you would with an illness, but just chronically low energy. You sleep, but you never feel truly rested. You wake up feeling like you've already been working for hours, even though you just got up. You start tasks with the intention of completing them, but find yourself losing motivation halfway through. Everything just feels a little bit harder than it should be, a little bit more effortful, but you can't quite pinpoint why. There's also a psychological effect that ancient texts on plant energy warned about. Poppies are said to trigger what we might call memory loops or rumination cycles. People living near poppies often find themselves dwelling on the past more than usual, thinking about relationships that ended, opportunities that were missed, mistakes that were made. It's not that these thoughts never occurred before, but suddenly they're more persistent, more emotionally charged, harder to release. I worked with a client once who had placed a beautiful arrangement of dried poppies in her bedroom. She thought they looked artistic, appreciated the bold color against her neutral walls, but within a couple of weeks, she started noticing changes in her mental state. She found herself thinking constantly about an ex-partner she hadn't thought about in years. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and her mind would immediately go to regrets, to things she wished she'd done differently, to a general sense of life having somehow gone wrong. We removed the poppies, and within days those intrusive thoughts quieted down. She could think about her past without getting stuck in it. For families with children, elderly members, or anyone recovering from illness, poppies are particularly inadvisable. These groups are already energetically vulnerable. Their life force is either still developing, naturally declining, or temporarily weakened. Placing them near flowers that drain vitality is like asking someone who's already struggling to carry an additional weight. It's not helping them build strength, it's making an already challenging situation even harder. From a business and prosperity perspective, poppies can create very specific problems. In Feng Shui, we track the flow of wealth energy very carefully. We want it to enter easily, gather in certain areas, and remain stable and growing. Poppies tend to create what I call prosperity leaks. You might attract customers, but struggle to close sales. You might make money, but find it slipping through your fingers somehow, unexpected expenses coming up, deals falling through at the last minute, that sort of thing. The money comes close but doesn't quite land and stay. One business owner I consulted with had planted poppies all around the entrance to their storefront. They thought the bright red would attract attention and energy. And it did attract attention, but the wrong kind. People would stop and look, might even come to the door, but then wouldn't actually enter or would leave without buying anything. Sales dropped noticeably. When we removed the poppies and replaced them with healthier options like sunflowers and marigolds, both yang energy flowers that invite prosperity, sales returned to normal levels within about a month. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not suggesting poppies are evil or cursed. They're just flowers with a particular energetic signature that happens to be incompatible with the needs of a living space. They can be beautiful in the right context. A painting of poppies on your wall? Generally fine, because the energetic impact of an image is far less intense than a living plant or even dried flowers. A brief encounter with poppies in a memorial garden, perfectly appropriate for that purpose. But as ongoing residents in your home, they're simply not suitable. If you're drawn to flowers with soft, graceful energy, there are much better options. White lotus flowers carry similar delicacy, but with pure, clear energy rather than heavy yin. Peonies give you those full, gorgeous blooms without the energetic drawbacks. Magnolias offer elegance and grace while maintaining positive, life-affirming vibrations. These are flowers that beautify your space without compromising its energetic health. Number 5. Angel's Trumpet. Angel's Trumpet is a flower that, when you first see it, seems almost otherworldly. Those large, hanging bell-shaped blooms, the way they dangle downward like bells waiting to be rung, there's something both beautiful and vaguely unsettling about them. And that instinctive unease many people feel, it's actually worth paying attention to. Because in this case, both traditional wisdom and practical concerns align to say that this is not a flower you want anywhere near your living space. Let's start with the most basic Feng Shui principle about Angel's Trumpet. In traditional energy theory, the direction a flower faces matters tremendously. Flowers that face upward are said to carry rising energy, energy that lifts spirits, promotes growth, encourages optimism, and forward movement. Flowers that face downward, however, carry descending energy. The energy they release doesn't rise and circulate. Instead, it sinks, it presses down, it creates a sense of heaviness in the space around them. There's an old saying in Feng Shui that goes, "Flowers that face the ground keep people's heads down." What this means is that objects which direct energy downward tend to have a corresponding effect on human consciousness and mood. They can weigh down a person's spirit, dampen their enthusiasm and motivation, cloud their mental clarity. It's like trying to think clearly while someone is constantly pushing down on your shoulders. The pressure might be gentle, but it's relentless, and over time, it wears you down. The appearance of Angel's Trumpet amplifies this problem. Those huge trumpet-shaped blooms, hanging downward, look almost like horns being blown from some distant, otherworldly realm. In South American cultures where this plant originates, it actually has a long history of use in spiritual and shamanic practices. It was used in rituals intended to alter consciousness, to facilitate communication with spirit realms, and even as a natural sedative. While these traditional uses are rare today, and I certainly don't recommend anyone attempt them, what they tell us is that this plant has powerful effects on human consciousness. And here's the thing about Angel's Trumpet that should concern everyone. Every single part of this plant is highly toxic. The flowers, the leaves, the stems, even the sap, all contain dangerous compounds that can cause serious harm. Even indirect exposure can be problematic. Simply brushing against the plant and getting a bit of sap on your skin, inhaling its fragrance too deeply, especially at night when the scent intensifies. These seemingly minor contacts can lead to headaches, dizziness, nausea, difficulty sleeping, and digestive problems. For households with children or pets, angel's trumpet represents a genuine safety hazard. Children are naturally curious, might touch or even taste interesting-looking plants. Pets might brush against blooms or chew on leaves. The consequences could be severe, potentially even life-threatening. This isn't superstition or folklore. This is straightforward toxicology. The plant is dangerous, period. But beyond the physical toxicity, there's the energetic impact to consider. Many Feng Shui masters, myself included, believe that angel's trumpet acts as an amplifier for whatever negative emotional energy already exists in a space. Think of it like a loudspeaker. It doesn't create the sound, but it makes whatever sound is already present much, much louder. If your home is generally peaceful and harmonious, angel's trumpet might not cause dramatic problems, though I still wouldn't recommend keeping it. But if there are existing tensions, unresolved conflicts, lingering resentments, any kind of negative emotional undercurrent, the presence of angel's trumpet can magnify those issues significantly. Small cracks in relationships become visible fractures. Minor irritations become major sources of conflict. Problems that might have resolved naturally instead become entrenched and escalate. I consulted once with a family who had planted angel's trumpet near their front entrance, thinking it would make a dramatic visual statement, and it did, but not in the way they hoped. Within a few weeks they noticed that their teenage son, who had always been somewhat moody but manageable, became significantly more withdrawn, and oppositional arguments between the parents, which had been occasional and minor, became frequent and intense. The whole household felt heavier, more tense, more exhausting to live in. When we discussed their situation, I learned that there had been some underlying stress even before the plant appeared. The father was worried about job security but hadn't fully shared his concerns. The mother was feeling overwhelmed by responsibilities but was trying to just push through. The son was struggling socially at school but wasn't talking about it. These were real issues, but they were manageable. The family could have worked through them with communication and time. But with angel's trumpet amplifying the negative energy of all these unspoken worries and tensions, everything intensified. The job stress became almost paralyzing anxiety. The overwhelm became resentment. The social struggles became isolation. It was as if all the worst possible outcomes of each small problem were being drawn out and magnified. After we removed the plant and did some basic energy clearing in the home, the intensity decreased noticeably. The problems didn't disappear. Real-life issues rarely do, but they became much more manageable. From a prosperity standpoint, angel's trumpet is particularly harmful for financial flow. In Feng Shui, we understand that money energy needs to feel welcomed and comfortable in order to enter and remain in a space. Angel's trumpet creates the opposite effect. Its heavy, downward-pulling energy makes it difficult for prosperity chet to enter, and if it does manage to get in, it struggles to stay. The result is often a pattern of financial near misses and persistent blockages. Business people I've worked with who had angel's trumpet on their property reported frustrating patterns. They'd get meetings, but not contracts. Interest, but not commitments. Initial success that never translated into sustained growth. The money would get close enough to seem promising, but then something would always fall apart at the last moment. Removing this plant, along with making other Feng Shui adjustments, consistently helped restore a healthier financial flow. My firm recommendation is to avoid angel's trumpet entirely in residential or business settings. If you encounter it at a botanical garden, fine, admire it from a distance. Appreciate its unique appearance, but don't bring it home. Don't plant it near your entrance or living areas. Don't even bring cut blooms inside. The risks, both physical and energetic, far outweigh any aesthetic appeal. If you want dramatic, statement-making flowers for your entrance or garden, consider trumpet vine instead. Similar trumpet shape but facing upward, carrying rising rather than descending energy, and not toxic. Or look at hollyhocks, foxgloves, if you keep them out of reach of children and pets, delphiniums, any number of tall, impressive flowers that create visual impact without energetic cost. Number 6. Night blooming jasmine. Night blooming jasmine is one of those flowers that seems innocent enough at first encounter. In fact, many people actively seek it out because of its reputation for having a beautiful, intense fragrance. And during the daytime, when the flowers are closed and the plant is relatively quiet, it doesn't seem problematic. But come evening, especially after 9 o'clock at night, a very different character emerges. First, let me clarify something. When we talk about jasmine, we need to distinguish between day-blooming varieties and night-blooming varieties. They're quite different energetically. Day-blooming jasmine is generally fine, even beneficial in Feng Shui terms. It carries bright, clear energy. Its fragrance is pleasant without being overwhelming. It's associated with purity, happiness, and positive outcomes. Night-blooming jasmine, however, is an entirely different matter. The key issue with night-blooming jasmine is that it releases its strongest fragrance specifically during the hours when yin energy naturally dominates. From a Feng Shui perspective, the hours after sunset are when yang energy recedes and yin energy rises. This is natural and appropriate. We need that yin time for rest, for inner reflection, for the body to repair itself during sleep. But the key is balance. Night should be yin, but not excessively so. We still need enough yang energy present to maintain healthy boundaries and clear consciousness. Night blooming jasmine intensifies the already rising yin energy. Its fragrance, which is remarkably strong and travels surprising distances, doesn't just smell sweet, it carries a particular quality that draws in and concentrates yin chiv. For people who are sensitive to energy, and many of us are more sensitive than we realize, this can create a very uncomfortable feeling. A sense of unease that's hard to pinpoint. A feeling that something is off even though nothing observable has changed. The fragrance itself has an almost narcotic quality. When you first encounter it, it might seem pleasant, even lovely. But with prolonged exposure, especially night after night, many people report that it becomes overwhelming, almost suffocating. They find themselves feeling dizzy or disoriented. Headaches develop for no apparent reason. Sleep becomes difficult despite the fragrance supposedly being relaxing. And here's the strangest part. People start having unusually vivid dreams, often featuring people they don't recognize. In traditional folklore across many cultures, there are stories and warnings about flowers that release strong fragrances at night. These flowers are sometimes called spirit flowers or soul callers, plants that are said to attract the attention of wandering energies. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not telling you that planting night-blooming jasmine will definitely result in paranormal experiences. What I am saying is that the combination of heavy yin energy plus disorienting fragrance, plus the natural sensitivity of nighttime consciousness, creates conditions where people become more aware of subtle energies and sensations they would normally filter out. I've had countless families reach out to me with remarkably similar stories. They plant night-blooming jasmine near a window or along a fence line within days or weeks. Household members start having trouble sleeping. Children wake up crying, unable to articulate what's wrong, but clearly frightened. Adults report dreams of unfamiliar faces, of being in places they don't recognize, of conversations they can't quite remember upon waking. Some describe waking in the middle of the night feeling distinctly watched, or sensing a presence in the room, even though they're alone. One particularly memorable case involved a couple who had planted night-blooming jasmine right below their bedroom window. They loved falling asleep to the fragrance initially, found it romantic and soothing, but after about 2 weeks, both of them independently started experiencing disturbing dreams. The husband dreamed repeatedly of an old woman standing at the foot of their bed, just watching. The wife dreamed of hearing children crying somewhere in the house, but being unable to find them. Neither had shared these dreams with the other at first because they felt silly. But when they finally compared notes, they realized the dreams had started at almost exactly the same time, shortly after the jasmine began blooming heavily. We removed the plant, relocated it to a far corner of their property where the fragrance wouldn't reach the house, and the dreams stopped within a few nights. Now, were those dreams caused by wandering spirits attracted by the jasmine, or were they caused by the flower's fragrance affecting sleep cycles and brain chemistry in ways that triggered unusual dream activity? Honestly, the exact mechanism matters less than the practical outcome. The plant created problems. Removing it solved those problems. That's what matters. From a prosperity and career perspective, night-blooming jasmine creates what I call scattered energy. In Feng Shui, prosperity energy needs to gather and concentrate. It needs to find stable places to accumulate, like water collecting in a container. But when yin energy becomes too dominant, particularly the kind of heavy, dispersive yin energy that night-blooming jasmine generates, wealth qi struggles to take hold. Money comes in but doesn't stay. Opportunities appear but don't solidify. There's movement but no real progress. I've noticed a pattern with clients who have night-blooming jasmine on their property. They often describe feeling like they're working incredibly hard but never quite getting ahead. They're constantly busy, but somehow their bank accounts don't reflect all that effort. Deals that should close mysteriously fall through. Clients express interest but never commit. It's a pattern of perpetual near success that never quite manifests into actual success. If you have night-blooming jasmine and you're not willing to remove it entirely, at the very least, keep it as far from the main house as possible. Don't plant it near windows, especially bedroom windows. Don't place it near entrances where the fragrance can drift inside as people come and go. And if you can, try to position it so that prevailing winds carry the scent away from your living areas rather than toward them. Better yet, if you love jasmine fragrance, stick with day-blooming varieties or consider gardenias, which have a similarly sweet fragrance but carry much clearer, cleaner energy. Arabian jasmine is another good alternative. It blooms during the day and early evening rather than deep into the night, and its energy signature is far more compatible with residential spaces. Number 7. Apricot blossom. Apricot blossoms hold a very special place in East Asian culture, particularly in Chinese and Vietnamese traditions. They're closely associated with the Lunar New Year, with the transition from one cycle to another, with themes of renewal and fresh beginnings. In their proper context displayed at the right time, they're actually considered quite auspicious. But here's where it gets complicated, and why they've earned a place on this list. Apricot blossoms are what we might call energetically sensitive flowers. They don't just sit there looking pretty, regardless of conditions. Instead, they act almost like barometers or mirrors, reflecting the energetic state of the environment around them. When the energy in a home is balanced and healthy, apricot blossoms thrive. They bloom beautifully, maintain their vitality, and genuinely do bring that sense of fresh beginning they're famous for. But when the energy in a home is disrupted or imbalanced, apricot blossoms reveal that imbalance in very visible ways. An apricot tree or branch that blooms too early, before its natural time, is traditionally seen as a warning sign. It suggests that yang energy is rising too quickly or inappropriately, that natural rhythms are being disrupted. Conversely, apricot blossoms that wilt quickly or fail to bloom properly indicate stagnant or blocked energy, and branches that show unusual decay, spots, or damage. These are read as signs of negative energy accumulation. Now, you might be thinking, well, couldn't these things just be explained by weather conditions, plant health, soil quality? And yes, of course, those factors matter too. But here's what I've observed over decades of practice. When a household is experiencing genuine energetic problems, often multiple indicators show up simultaneously. The apricot blossoms behave oddly. Family members report feeling off. Small problems seem to multiply. Conflicts arise more easily. When you see these patterns clustering together, the wise response is to pay attention. The timing of apricot blossoms is particularly significant. They bloom during the transition between winter and spring, between the old year and new year in the lunar calendar. This is what Feng Shui calls a gateway time, a period when the veil between energetic states is particularly thin. Old patterns are breaking down and new patterns are forming. It's a time of great potential, but also great vulnerability. During these gateway times, if there's lingering negative energy or unresolved issues in a household, those issues can become amplified or activated. It's similar to how people often get sick during seasonal transitions. Their immune systems are adapting to changing conditions, and that adaptation period creates temporary vulnerability. The same principle applies energetically. And apricot blossoms, blooming right during this sensitive transition, can inadvertently become connection points or concentration spots for unstable energy. I want to be very clear about something. I'm not saying apricot blossoms are inherently bad or that you should never have them. In fact, for the Lunar New Year celebration, they're quite traditional and appropriate. What I am saying is that they require more care and attention than many other flowers. You need to be mindful about their condition, about where you place them, and about how long you keep them. The biggest mistakes I see people make with apricot blossoms fall into a few categories. First, displaying branches that are already damaged, wilted, or showing signs of decay. This is essentially inviting withering energy right into your home during a time when you should be celebrating renewal. If you're going to have apricot blossoms, make sure they're fresh, vibrant, and healthy looking. The moment they start to fade significantly, remove them. Second, placing them too close to main doors, bedrooms, or family altars. These are energetically sensitive areas that are especially important during transitional times. Apricot blossoms in these locations can create unexpected disruptions. Better locations include side rooms, studies, or outdoor garden areas where they can be appreciated but aren't dominating the main energy pathways of the home. Third, keeping them around too long after the New Year period has passed. Apricot blossoms are meant to mark a transition, to be present during the gateway time and then be released. Keeping them as permanent fixtures or trying to maintain them for weeks and weeks past their prime is like trying to keep the door between years permanently open. It creates a kind of energetic confusion, a sense that time is somehow stuck or uncertain. I had one family who bought a potted apricot tree and kept it in their entrance hall year-round. They loved the symbolism and wanted to keep that feeling of new beginnings present always. But what they found was that they struggled to actually complete or move past anything. Projects got started, but never quite finished. Relationships stayed in ambiguous, undefined states. Even simple decisions seemed to take forever. When we removed the apricot tree and replaced it with bamboo, which represents steady growth rather than transitional renewal, they found it much easier to follow through and achieve closure. If you want to work with apricot blossoms in a Feng Shui-friendly way, treat them as seasonal visitors rather than permanent residents. Bring them in for the New Year celebration or spring equinox. Choose branches that are healthy and vibrant, place them in appropriate locations, away from your most energetically sensitive areas. Enjoy them during their peak, and then release them gracefully when their time is done. This honors both the flower and the natural rhythm of energetic cycles. And if something does seem off with your apricot blossoms, if they're behaving strangely or declining faster than they should, don't ignore that. Treat it as useful information. Take a closer look at the energy in your home. Are there unresolved conflicts, stagnant areas that need attention, blocked pathways that need clearing? Use the message the flowers are giving you as motivation to address underlying issues. Number 8. Black rose. Roses are universally recognized symbols of love, passion, beauty, and emotional connection. Red roses speak of romantic love. Pink roses express gentle affection. White roses convey purity and new beginnings. Yellow roses celebrate friendship and joy. But black roses, they exist in an entirely different category, energetically and symbolically. First, let's establish something important. True black roses don't really exist in nature. What we call black roses are actually very dark red or deep purple roses, sometimes enhanced with dye to achieve that nearly black appearance. And this artificial quality is actually our first clue about their energetic problems. In Feng Shui, we're always wary of things that have been forced into an unnatural state. The process of creating something that nature doesn't normally produce often involves energetic disruption. In the system of 5 elements that underlies Feng Shui practice, black is associated with the water element. Water represents many things: depth, wisdom, mystery, intuition, the flow of emotion and resources. But water also represents the coldest, darkest, deepest places, the unknown, the unconscious, and in excess, water energy can drown out warmth, vitality, and connection. Black roses, because of their color and the symbolic weight that humans have attached to them over time, have become carriers of very heavy water element energy. They don't radiate life and growth the way other roses do. Instead, they seem to absorb energy from their surroundings, drawing it inward, holding it in dense, compressed form. This is what I mean when I describe them as energy sinks. Think about what happens when you place a very dark object in a bright room. That object absorbs light rather than reflecting it. It creates a visual weight, a spot where your eye is drawn, but where energy seems to disappear. Black roses function similarly on an energetic level. They create spots in your home where qi doesn't flow freely. It gets pulled in, compressed, slowed down, and the areas around these energy sinks often feel noticeably different, cooler emotionally, even if not physically, heavier, less vibrant. For individuals and couples, the effects of black roses can be quite subtle but persistent. Many people who keep black roses in their homes report feeling more emotionally disconnected over time. Conversations that used to flow easily become more stilted. Expressions of affection decrease gradually, without anyone quite noticing until the pattern is well established. It's not that black roses cause dramatic conflicts or obvious problems. Rather, they create a slow cooling effect, like ice gradually forming over a pond. The water is still there underneath, but it becomes harder and harder to access. I worked with a couple once who had decorated their bedroom with black rose imagery. Black rose prints on the wall, artificial black roses in a vase on the dresser, even black rose patterns on their bedding. They thought it looked sophisticated and romantic in a dramatic way. But over the course of several months, they noticed that their physical and emotional intimacy had declined significantly. They still cared about each other, but there was this distance that neither could quite explain or bridge. When we talked about their space, and I pointed out the overwhelming presence of black rose symbolism, they were initially skeptical. They're just decorations, they said. But they were willing to make changes, so we replaced the black rose theme with softer, warmer imagery, pinks and creams and gentle patterns. Within weeks, both of them reported feeling more emotionally available to each other. Small gestures of affection returned naturally. Conversations deepened again. The warmth that had been slowly freezing over began to thaw. From a business and financial perspective, black roses are particularly problematic. In Feng Shui, we want wealth energy to circulate actively, to move and grow and multiply. Black, as the most absorptive color, works against this principle. Rather than encouraging circulation, it encourages consolidation and holding, but not in a healthy savings way. More like a hoarding way, where resources gather but then become unavailable for use. Business owners who display black roses often notice patterns of financial hesitation. They find themselves unable to make investment decisions, unable to spend money even when spending would generate returns, unable to take calculated risks that would grow their enterprise. Or alternatively, they might see money coming in, but then that money seems to just disappear without anything substantial to show for it. It's there one moment and gone the next, absorbed into unexpected expenses or financial black holes. The spiritual dimension of black roses is worth addressing as well. In traditional folk wisdom across many cultures, extremely dark objects, especially flowers which are normally colorful and life-affirming, are seen as potential gathering points for heavy or troubled energies. The idea isn't necessarily that black roses summon spirits or demons, rather it's that they create energetic conditions that are more hospitable to dense, sorrowful, or stagnant spiritual energies. Think about it this way. If you were a spirit or an energetic presence, where would you feel more comfortable? In a bright, warm, flowing environment full of clear, vibrant colors, or in a cool, dark, heavy environment where energy is compressed and hidden? Dense yin energies naturally gravitate toward environments that match their frequency. By filling your space with black roses, you're essentially putting up a welcome sign for exactly the kind of energy you'd rather keep at a distance. Does this mean that anyone who owns a black rose is going to experience paranormal activity? Of course not. But what it does mean is that you're creating energetic conditions that are less than ideal for a thriving, healthy living space. You're working against the principles of flow, warmth, and vitality that make a house feel like a true home. My recommendation is simple. Avoid black roses in your living space. If you find them aesthetically interesting, appreciate them in photographs or from a distance, but don't make them a recurring theme in your home decor. And definitely don't place them in key areas like bedrooms, living rooms, or near your front entrance. If you're attracted to the sophisticated, dramatic aesthetic that black roses represent, there are much better ways to achieve that look. Deep burgundy roses can give you drama without the heavy energetic cost. Dark purple can provide mystery while maintaining better energy flow. Or consider moving away from roses entirely and working with other flowers that carry the sophisticated energy you want. Dark dahlias, deep purple irises, even very dark tulips can all provide visual drama while maintaining healthier energetic properties. The goal isn't to fill your space with only bright, cheerful colors if that's not your personal aesthetic. The goal is to be intentional about the energy you're inviting in, to understand the effects of your choices, and to create an environment that supports rather than undermines your well-being and goals. Number 9. Red spider lily. Among all the flowers I'm discussing today, the red spider lily might be the one with the most intense and unmistakable symbolism. This isn't a flower where the meaning is ambiguous or varies significantly across cultures. Throughout East Asia, Japan, China, Korea, and beyond, the red spider lily carries essentially the same message: separation, death, the boundary between worlds, the path that souls walk when they leave this life and move toward whatever comes next. There's something about the red spider lily that feels almost deliberately otherworldly. That vivid red color isn't the warm, living red of a healthy rose or a ripe apple. It's a different kind of red altogether. More like the red of a sunset that's fading fast, intense but clearly temporary. And then there's the unusual structure of the flower itself. Those long, curved stamens reaching outward like flames or like fingers grasping at something just out of reach. The whole appearance is striking but also unsettling. But here's what makes the red spider lily truly unique and truly problematic from a Feng Shui perspective. The flower and the leaves never appear together. Never. When the bright red flowers bloom, rising up on bare stalks, the leaves have already died back completely. Then, after the flowers fade and disappear, the leaves emerge and grow through the winter. But the flowers and leaves never meet. They spend their entire existence apart, never seeing each other, never touching, a lifetime of separation built right into the plant's biology. This unusual growth pattern has given the red spider lily its most common symbolic meaning. The flower represents loved ones who are forever separated, souls who cannot meet, connections that are eternally broken. In Buddhist tradition, these flowers are said to grow along the path to the afterlife, blooming on the banks of the river that souls must cross to leave the earthly realm behind. They're often called flowers of the far shore or flowers of goodbye, marking the boundary between this world and the next. Now, when a flower carries this much symbolic weight, when culture after culture has assigned it the same meaning over hundreds or even thousands of years, that symbolism becomes part of the flower's energetic reality. It's not just a story we tell about the plant, it becomes an actual energetic imprint that affects how the plant interacts with its environment and the people in that environment. In Feng Shui terms, red spider lilies are classified as pure yin energy plants, and I need to emphasize what I mean by pure yin because there's a difference between balanced yin energy and pure yin energy. Balanced yin energy is restful, receptive, calming, nurturing. It's necessary and beneficial in the right contexts. Pure yin energy, on the other hand, is energy that has almost no yang component whatsoever. It's heavy, cold, stagnant, associated with endings rather than beginnings, with separation rather than connection, with the realm of the dead rather than the realm of the living. A home, any space where living people are going about their daily lives, needs to be predominantly yang. It needs movement, warmth, light, connection, growth. When you introduce pure yin objects like red spider lilies into this environment, you're essentially placing something that belongs in one realm into a space designed for an entirely different realm. The mismatch creates disruption. The effects of this disruption can manifest in multiple ways. Many families who have planted red spider lilies in their gardens or near their homes report that certain areas start to feel uncomfortable. Not in a way that's easy to describe or explain to others, but a distinct sense that something is off. Children often pick up on this first because they're more sensitive and less likely to rationalize away their instincts. They'll suddenly refuse to play in certain parts of the yard. They'll avoid walking past certain areas. If you ask them why, they might say it feels scary or it feels sad, even though nothing visible has changed. Adults might experience this as simply not wanting to go outside after dark, finding excuses to stay inside even on nice evenings, feeling a chill run through them when they pass certain spots in the garden, even on warm days. Some describe it as a feeling of being watched or a sense that they're intruding somewhere they're not welcome in their own property. Inside the home, if red spider lilies are planted close enough that their energy reaches the living spaces, the effects can be even more pronounced. Sleep disturbances are extremely common. People report having unusually vivid dreams, often featuring people they don't recognize or places that feel foreign yet somehow familiar. Elderly family members might have dreams of deceased relatives, waking feeling sad or unsettled, even if the dreams weren't explicitly nightmarish. Children often have the hardest time with red spider lily energy. They might wake up crying multiple times a night without being able to explain what's wrong. They might develop sudden fears of the dark or insist that there's someone in their room even though the room is empty. Pets, who are also quite sensitive to energy, may change their behavior patterns. Dogs might bark at seemingly nothing or refuse to go into certain areas. Cats might stare intently at empty spaces or avoid parts of the property they use to frequent. On an emotional level, red spider lilies tend to stir up feelings of grief, loss, and melancholy. People living near these flowers often find themselves dwelling on past losses more than usual, thinking about people who have died, feeling sad about relationships that ended. Even if logically they know these are things that happened in the past and can't be changed, the emotional weight feels fresh and present. For married couples or families trying to maintain close bonds, this can be particularly destructive. The fundamental energy of separation that red spider lilies carry works against the energy of connection and togetherness that healthy relationships need. I've heard countless stories over the years following a very similar pattern. A family plants red spider lilies somewhere on their property. Within weeks or months, people in the household start feeling more emotionally distant from each other. Communication becomes difficult. Misunderstandings multiply. People withdraw into themselves rather than reaching out to each other. From a practical and financial perspective, red spider lilies are associated with what I call invisible obstacles. These aren't dramatic, obvious failures. Instead, they're situations where everything almost works out, but doesn't quite. Contracts get to the final signature stage and then mysteriously fall apart. Business partnerships that seem promising just gradually fade away. Projects lose momentum for reasons nobody can quite articulate. It's frustrating because there's often no clear cause to point to, just a persistent pattern of things not quite coming together. One client I worked with years ago had planted a whole border of red spider lilies along the front of their business property, thinking the striking red color would attract attention and customers. And it did attract attention. People would stop and look, but they wouldn't come in. Or if they did come in, they would browse briefly and leave without buying anything. The business owner couldn't understand it. The products were good, prices were competitive, service was friendly, yet sales were dismal. When we removed the red spider lilies and replaced them with flowering plants that carried more welcoming, prosperity-friendly energy, the change was dramatic. Within weeks, not only were more people entering the business, but they were staying longer, engaging more, and actually making purchases. Same products, same staff, same location, different plants, completely different energetic environment, completely different results. So what should you do if you have red spider lilies on your property, or if you're considering planting them? My strong recommendation is don't. These flowers belong in specific contexts: memorial gardens, cemetery plantings, Buddhist temple grounds, places that are explicitly dedicated to honoring the dead and marking the boundary between worlds. In those settings, they're appropriate and even beautiful. But in a residential setting, a place that's meant for living, for growing, for connecting, they're completely out of place. If you already have red spider lilies and you're experiencing any of the issues I've described, consider removing them, or at the very least transplanting them to the furthest possible corner of your property, somewhere well away from the main house and primary living areas. Sometimes that's enough distance for the energy to dissipate before it reaches your actual living space. And if you're drawn to the striking appearance of red spider lilies, there are alternatives that can give you a similar visual effect without the heavy energetic cost. Red canna lilies can provide that bold red color with much more vibrant energy. Red dahlias offer drama without sorrow. Even red dahlias, which are completely unrelated to spider lilies botanically, can give you intense color without the problematic symbolism. Remember, beauty is important, but it's not the only factor to consider when choosing what to plant around your home. The energetic effect matters just as much, if not more. Your home should be a sanctuary, a place that supports and nourishes you and your family. Every element you bring into that space should contribute positively to that goal. Number 10. Dandelion. Now I know what some of you might be thinking when you see dandelion on this list. Wait a minute. Dandelions are just common weeds. They're everywhere. How could they possibly be a problem? And it's true that dandelions are incredibly common, so common that most people don't even think of them as flowers at all. But that ubiquity doesn't mean they're energetically neutral. In fact, from a Feng Shui perspective, dandelions represent a particular kind of energetic challenge that's worth understanding. The primary issue with dandelions isn't that they carry dark or heavy energy like some of the other flowers we've discussed. Dandelions aren't yin flowers in the way that poppies or red spider lilies are. The problem with dandelions is almost the opposite. They represent energy that's too light, too scattered, too impermanent to provide any real support or stability. Think about the dandelion's life cycle for a moment. It grows quickly, blooms briefly, and then transforms into those delicate seed heads we all recognize. Those fluffy white spheres that children love to blow on, watching the seeds scatter in every direction. And that's exactly the point. The entire purpose of that seed head is dispersal, spreading far and wide, never staying in one place, carried off by the slightest breeze to land wherever chance takes them. This is why in Feng Shui, dandelions represent scattered, unstable energy. Energy that never gathers, never concentrates, never builds into anything substantial. It's always moving, always changing, always being carried away. And while that might sound romantic or freeing in a poetic sense, it's actually quite problematic for a living space that needs to be stable, grounded, and capable of holding and accumulating good fortune. In Feng Shui practice, we spend a lot of time working with the principle of gathering versus scattering. A healthy home needs to be able to gather energy, to collect and concentrate it in beneficial ways. When wealth energy flows in, you want it to find stable places to accumulate rather than immediately flowing right back out. When beneficial opportunities arrive, you want them to take root and develop rather than vanishing before you can capitalize on them. When good relationships form, you want them to deepen and strengthen rather than remaining superficial and temporary. Dandelions work against all of these goals. Their entire energetic signature is about dispersal and impermanence. Having them as a significant presence around your home, especially near entrances or in areas associated with wealth and prosperity, sends a message to the universe that nothing needs to stay here. Everything is temporary. Everything passes through without taking root. I've worked with families who describe experiencing exactly this kind of pattern in their lives. Things come and go constantly, but nothing really sticks. Money arrives but somehow slips away just as quickly through unexpected expenses or poor decisions. Job opportunities appear but never quite materialize into actual employment. Relationships form but don't deepen, staying casual and surface level no matter how much time passes. Projects get started with enthusiasm but are abandoned halfway through. There's lots of movement and activity, but no real progress or accumulation. When I visit properties experiencing these patterns and find dandelions growing prolifically, especially near important areas like the front entrance, mailbox, or prosperity corners of the property, I'm not surprised. The energy pattern the family is experiencing matches the energetic signature of the plant perfectly. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Unlike some of the other flowers we've discussed, dandelions don't necessarily create these patterns of dispersal and impermanence. Often, they're more like indicators or amplifiers. When a space already has challenges with energy scattering, when the Feng Shui is already somewhat scattered and unfocused, dandelions will naturally thrive there. They're attracted to that kind of energy because it matches their own nature. Once they're established, though, they do tend to reinforce and amplify the existing pattern. It becomes a feedback loop. Scattered energy attracts dandelions. Dandelions produce more scattered energy. The pattern strengthens and becomes more entrenched. Breaking this cycle requires both addressing the dandelions themselves and fixing the underlying Feng Shui issues that allowed them to flourish in the first place. One client I remember quite clearly was a young woman who was trying to build a career as a freelance designer. She was talented, hardworking, genuinely good at what she did, but she couldn't seem to get any traction. She'd land a client, complete a project, get paid, and then have to start the entire process over again from scratch. She never managed to build a reliable client base or generate recurring income. It was a constant, exhausting cycle of hustling for the next gig. When I visited her home, the first thing I noticed was that the area right around her front door was absolutely covered in dandelions. I mean, completely overtaken. She'd mentioned that she meant to clear them out, but just hadn't gotten around to it. Given how busy she was constantly scrambling for work, I wasn't surprised she hadn't found the time. But here's the thing. Those dandelions weren't just an aesthetic issue or a simple garden maintenance problem. They were both a reflection of and a contributor to the energetic pattern playing out in her career. energy scattering in all directions instead of building and accumulating. We cleared the dandelions completely, replaced them with low-growing herbs like thyme and creeping rosemary, plants that stay rooted and spread in a controlled, grounded way. We also made some other Feng Shui adjustments to help energy gather and stabilize in her space. Within about 6 weeks, her career situation shifted noticeably. She landed a major client who then referred her to others. She started getting repeat business instead of having to constantly find new clients. Her income stabilized and began to grow predictably. She finally had the sense of building something rather than just treading water. Now, I'm not claiming that removing dandelions alone will solve all financial or career problems. That would be an oversimplification. But as part of a comprehensive approach to creating better energy flow, addressing plants like dandelions that reinforce scattered, impermanent energy can make a real difference. For relationships and family harmony, dandelions create a similar kind of challenge. Connections remain superficial. Conversations stay on the surface. People in the household feel like they're occupying the same space, but not truly connecting deeply. There's a lack of emotional rootedness, a feeling that everyone is somewhat disconnected and drifting in their own direction. I've noticed this particularly with families where teenagers are going through that natural phase of wanting independence and separation. A certain amount of that is completely normal and healthy. But when dandelions are prominent around the home, that natural pulling away can become excessive. Kids become almost completely unreachable, disconnected not just from parents, but from any sense of family identity or belonging. The home stops feeling like a true anchor and becomes more like a place where people happen to sleep between activities elsewhere. From a mental and emotional well-being perspective, the scattered energy of dandelions can contribute to difficulty focusing and maintaining attention. People who spend a lot of time in environments where dandelions dominate often report feeling scattered themselves. They start tasks but don't finish them. Their minds wander constantly. They struggle to maintain focus long enough to complete projects or think deeply about important issues. Everything feels fragmented and disconnected. Now, I want to be balanced here. Dandelions aren't evil. They're not harboring dark spirits or attracting misfortune in the way that some other flowers on this list might. In fact, in certain contexts, the light, free, dispersive energy of dandelions can even be somewhat positive. If someone is stuck, overly attached to things that need to be released, too rigid in their thinking, a bit of dandelion energy might actually help loosen things up. But as a general rule, and especially if you're already experiencing challenges with scattered energy, lack of focus, financial instability, or difficulty building lasting connections, dandelions are not helping your situation. They're reinforcing exactly the patterns you're trying to move away from. My recommendation is to keep dandelions out of key areas of your property. Don't let them take over near your entrance, which is where energy flows in and should be greeted by stability and welcoming presence rather than scattered impermanence. Don't let them dominate your wealth corners, those sections of your property associated with financial prosperity. Don't let them grow unchecked near windows and doors of your home where their energy can drift inside. If you have children who love blowing on dandelion seed heads, which many kids do because it's fun and magical feeling, you don't need to completely ban that activity. Just don't let those dandelion patches be close to your house. Have a designated area further out in the yard where dandelions are allowed to grow wild, and teach kids that's the dandelion zone for play. But around the house itself, maintain different plants that support stability and gathering rather than dispersal. What should you plant instead? There are so many wonderful options for ground cover that stays low and won't obstruct energy flow. Consider things like clover, which actually attracts good luck in many traditions, or creeping thyme, which smells wonderful and represents courage and strength. For slightly taller plants near entrances and pathways, look at options like lavender for peace and clarity, rosemary for protection and mental sharpness, or even well-maintained grass which represents steady, consistent growth. For areas specifically associated with wealth and prosperity, traditional Feng Shui recommends jade plants, money plants, bamboo or citrus trees, if your climate allows. These plants all represent growth that builds on itself, accumulation, and increasing abundance over time. They root deeply, they stay put, they develop slowly but surely into something substantial. That's the kind of energy you want supporting your financial life. For relationship and family areas, consider flowers like peonies, which represent lasting love and honor, or orchids, which symbolize refinement and enduring bonds. Roses in pink or red shades work well too, as long as they're healthy and well maintained. The key is choosing plants that represent depth, commitment, and enduring connection rather than the brief scattered presence of dandelions. The beautiful thing about making these kinds of changes is that they work on multiple levels simultaneously. On the most practical level, you're improving the appearance of your property, creating a more intentional and cared-for environment. On an energetic level, you're shifting the dominant frequencies in your space, from scattered and temporary to grounded and accumulating. And on a psychological level, the act of making these changes reinforces your own intention to create more stability, focus, and lasting success in your life. Bringing it all together, understanding flower energy in your home. So here we are, having explored these 10 flowers that traditional Feng Shui wisdom has long cautioned against keeping in living spaces. And I hope what's becoming clear is that this isn't about superstition or blind adherence to ancient rules. It's about understanding that everything in our environment interacts with us energetically, and that plants, being living entities with their own growth patterns and deeply embedded symbolic meanings, interact with us particularly powerfully. Each of these flowers carries its own specific energetic signature. Yellow chrysanthemums with their heavy associations with death and farewell. Camellias with their cold, still, frozen energy. Lilacs with their disorienting twilight quality. Poppies with their soft but toxic drain on vitality. Angel's trumpet with its downward pulling, reality-bending presence. Night-blooming jasmine with its yin-intensifying fragrance. Apricot blossoms with their sensitivity to energetic imbalance. Black roses with their absorptive, disconnecting influence. Red spider lilies with their pure yin energy of eternal separation, and dandelions with their inability to gather or maintain anything stable. None of these flowers are inherently evil. None of them are cursed or possessed or fundamentally wrong, but each of them in its own way carries energy that's incompatible with what we need in our living spaces. We need homes that feel warm, safe, vibrant, and alive. Spaces that support our relationships, our health, our prosperity, and our sense of well-being. When we fill those spaces with flowers that carry heavy yin energy, associations with death and endings, toxic influences, or scattered instability, we're working against our own best interests. Over my 30 years of practicing Feng Shui, I've seen countless examples of how changing just one or two elements in a space can shift the entire energetic atmosphere. I've watched families go from constant conflict to peaceful coexistence simply by removing flowers that were amplifying negative energy. I've seen business owners turn failing ventures into thriving enterprises after clearing out plants that were blocking prosperity flow. I've witnessed individuals overcome depression and lethargy by addressing the draining influences in their immediate environment. And here's what I want you to understand. These changes don't require expensive renovations or elaborate rituals. Often, the most powerful shifts come from simple, straightforward actions. Removing a plant that's in the wrong place, replacing cut flowers that have started to wilt, choosing new additions to your garden with awareness of what they represent energetically. These are things anyone can do, regardless of budget or expertise. But here's the equally important point. You don't need to panic if you discover that you currently have one or more of these flowers in your home or garden. The presence of these plants doesn't doom you to misfortune. It simply means you have an opportunity to make a positive change. Feng Shui is always about working with what is and gradually improving it, not about achieving perfection immediately. If you've realized that you have yellow chrysanthemums in your living room, or camellias planted right outside your bedroom window, or a black rose theme in your decor, take a breath. You're not in danger. You've simply gained new information about how your environment might be affecting you. Now you get to decide what to do with that information. Start by observing. Over the next week or two, pay attention to how you and your family members feel in spaces where these flowers are present. Do you feel lighter and more energized when you're away from those areas? Do you sleep better when you're not near certain plants? Do arguments seem to happen more frequently in rooms decorated with particular flowers? Just notice, gather information without judgment. Then, if you notice patterns that confirm what we've discussed, make changes gradually. You don't have to remove everything at once. Start with the most problematic items, the ones closest to key areas like bedrooms, entrances, and family gathering spaces. Replace them with alternatives that carry more beneficial energy. Notice how the atmosphere shifts. Let that positive change motivate you to continue improving your space. And as you make these changes, do so with intention. This is important. Don't just mechanically remove plants while thinking about your grocery list. Take a moment to consciously release the energy those flowers carried and welcome in new, more beneficial energy. You might say something simple like, "I release what doesn't serve my highest good and welcome peace and prosperity into my home." The specific words don't matter as much as the intentionality behind them. Creating a flower-friendly home, what to choose instead. Now, I don't want to leave you with just a list of what to avoid. That's only half the picture. Let's talk about what you should surround yourself with instead, because there are so many beautiful flowers and plants that carry wonderful energy and can genuinely enhance your life. For entrance areas where you want to welcome beneficial energy and opportunities, consider flowers like sunflowers, which represent optimism, vitality, and success. Marigolds are excellent for protection and attracting positive attention. Daffodils symbolize new beginnings and fresh opportunities. All of these are yang flowers that encourage energy to flow freely and abundantly. For living rooms and family gathering spaces, where you want to promote harmony, connection, and joy, look at options like pink or red roses for love and warmth, gerbera daisies for cheerfulness and innocence, or tulips for perfect love and family unity. These flowers create atmospheres that naturally encourage people to relax, open up, and enjoy each other's company. For bedrooms where you need restful energy but not stagnant or heavy energy, white or pink lotus flowers are ideal if you can find them. They represent purity and peaceful sleep. Jasmine, and I mean day-blooming jasmine specifically, can work well for its soothing fragrance and association with sweet dreams. Lavender is another excellent choice for bedrooms, promoting relaxation without heaviness. For home offices or study areas, where you need mental clarity, focus, and productivity, consider orchids, which represent refinement and mental strength. Chrysanthemums in colors other than yellow, particularly white or purple varieties, can support concentration. Even simple plants like bamboo or snake plants, while not flowering, provide excellent energy for workspaces. For prosperity and wealth corners, which in classical Feng Shui are typically the far left corner of your property or rooms when standing at the entrance looking in, you want plants that represent growth, abundance, and accumulation. Peonies are absolutely wonderful for this, representing honor and wealth. Lotuses, if you can grow them, are considered extremely auspicious. Citrus trees with fruit visible are powerful symbols of golden abundance. Even simple potted herbs like basil, which is associated with money and success, can be effective. One thing I always emphasize is the importance of plant health. A sick, dying, or neglected plant, no matter what species it is, carries energy of decline and decay. So it's not enough just to choose the right flowers. You also need to care for them properly. Dead flowers should be removed immediately, not left to wilt and rot in their vases. Dried arrangements should be dusted regularly and replaced if they start looking shabby. Living plants should be watered, fertilized, and pruned as needed to maintain their vitality. In fact, I would rather see a home with no flowers at all than a home filled with dying, neglected flowers. The energy of neglect and decay is far more harmful than simple emptiness. If you're not in a position to care for living plants properly, it's better to use high-quality artificial flowers that are kept clean, or to appreciate flowers in other ways, through photographs, paintings, or brief visits to gardens and parks. Seasonal considerations and timing. Another aspect of working with flower energy that's often overlooked is the importance of seasonality. In traditional Feng Shui, we recognize that energy flows differently during different seasons, and what's appropriate for one season might not be appropriate for another. Spring is a time of awakening yang energy, of new growth and fresh beginnings. This is when flowers like daffodils, tulips, cherry blossoms, and forsythia are perfect. They match and support the rising energy of the season. Summer, with its peak yang energy, is the time for bold, bright, fully blooming flowers. Roses, sunflowers, zinnias, all of these thrive energetically in summer. Fall is when yang energy begins to recede and yin energy starts to rise. This is actually when some of the flowers we've discussed, like chrysanthemums in appropriate colors, can be more acceptable. The energy of the season matches their nature better, but even so, you want to be careful not to overdo the yin influence. Winter is the deep yin season, when nature rests and turns inward. This isn't the time for lots of flowers. A few evergreens, maybe some winter berries for color, but mostly it's a time to embrace simplicity and allow for natural rest and restoration. Trying to fight against seasonal energy patterns usually doesn't work well. Forcing brightly blooming summer flowers in the middle of winter creates an energetic disconnect. The flowers might be beautiful, but they're out of sync with the natural flow of energy, and that creates a subtle but persistent sense of something being wrong or off. There are also personal timing considerations. If someone in your household is going through a difficult transition, dealing with loss, recovering from illness, or facing major life changes, you want to be especially careful about the flowers you bring into your space during that time. Heavy yin flowers that might be marginally acceptable during stable times can be devastating during vulnerable periods. I remember working with a widow who in her grief surrounded herself with white lilies because they reminded her of her husband's funeral. She thought keeping them close helped her feel connected to him, but what they were actually doing was keeping her stuck in that moment of loss, unable to move forward through her grief process. The energy of endings and death that the lilies carried prevented her from opening to the possibility of healing and eventual new beginnings. When we gently transitioned her to flowers that honored memory but also represented hope and continuity, like forget-me-nots and white roses, she found it easier to grieve in a healthy way that eventually led to acceptance and peace. The deeper principle: awareness and intention. As we come toward the end of our exploration today, I want to zoom out and talk about the deeper principle underlying all of this. Because yes, I've given you specific information about specific flowers, and that information is valuable and practical. But the deeper lesson is about developing awareness of how your environment affects you and learning to make intentional choices based on that awareness. Most people move through their environments almost unconsciously. They choose decor based on what catches their eye in the moment, what's on sale, what seems pretty or trendy. They don't stop to consider how each element might be affecting their mood, their energy levels, their relationships, their success in various life areas. They just accumulate things and then wonder why their home doesn't feel quite right, or why certain problems persist despite their best efforts to solve them. What I'm inviting you to do is to become more conscious, to recognize that your home is not just a passive container for your life, but an active participant in shaping your experiences. Everything you bring into your space, every color, every object, every plant, contributes to the overall energetic atmosphere, and that atmosphere in turn influences your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and outcomes in ways both subtle and profound. When you understand this, suddenly you have access to a powerful tool for positive change. You're not helpless in the face of persistent problems. You're not stuck with situations that drain your energy or undermine your goals. You can actively shape your environment to support the life you want to create. This doesn't mean you need to become obsessive or paranoid about every little thing in your home. That would create its own problems. A kind of anxious hypervigilance that's exhausting and counterproductive. What it means is developing a gentle, ongoing awareness, noticing how different spaces in your home feel, paying attention to patterns, being willing to make changes when something clearly isn't working. It also means trusting your own instincts and perceptions. If a particular flower makes you feel uncomfortable or uneasy, even if you can't articulate exactly why, listen to that feeling. Your subconscious and your energetic body often pick up on things before your conscious mind fully understands them. You don't need to be able to explain or justify your response. If something feels wrong, honor that and remove it from your space. Conversely, if a particular flower brings you joy every time you see it, if it genuinely lifts your spirits and makes your space feel happier and lighter, keep it, even if it's not on the traditional list of recommended flowers. Your personal response matters. Feng Shui principles provide guidelines, but they're not rigid rules that override your own experience and intuition. The goal is to create a space that feels good to you, that supports your well-being and your goals, that helps you become the best version of yourself. Sometimes that means following traditional wisdom about which flowers to avoid. Sometimes it means experimenting and finding what works for your unique situation. Always it means staying conscious, staying intentional, and being willing to adjust as needed. Practical steps you can take today. Let me give you some concrete action steps you can take right now today to begin improving the flower energy in your home. First, do a walkthrough of your property, both inside and outside. Take a notepad with you and write down every significant flower or plant you notice. Note where it is, what condition it's in, and if you know what type of flower or plant it is, don't judge or try to change anything yet. Just gather information. Second, once you have your list, do some research on any plants you're not familiar with. Look up their symbolic meanings, their traditional uses, their energetic properties according to Feng Shui or other traditional systems. You might discover that some of the plants you've had for years carry meanings or energies you weren't aware of. Third, pay attention to your own responses. As you move through your space over the next few days, notice how you feel in different areas. Do you feel energized or drained, peaceful or agitated, happy or sad? Notice if these feelings correlate with the presence of particular plants or flowers. Fourth, identify the easiest, highest impact change you could make. Maybe there's a dying plant that's been sitting in your living room for weeks. Remove it today. Maybe there's a black rose arrangement in your bedroom. Replace it this weekend with something lighter and more life-affirming. Start with changes that are simple and obvious. Fifth, as you remove flowers or plants that aren't serving you, do so respectfully. Thank them for whatever beauty they provided. Release them with gratitude and consciously welcome new, more beneficial energy into that space. This kind of intentional ritual, even if it's very simple, helps solidify the energetic shift you're making. Sixth, when choosing new flowers or plants to bring into your home, take your time. Don't just grab whatever catches your eye. Think about what energy you want to invite into each space. Research your options, choose consciously and deliberately. The care you put into selection will be reflected in the results you experience. Seventh, commit to regular maintenance. Set aside time weekly to check on your plants, remove dead flowers, water and care for living plants, dust artificial arrangements, and generally ensure that everything in your space looks vital and well cared for. This ongoing attention makes an enormous difference in the energy your plants carry. Eighth, educate yourself further. What I've shared today is just an introduction to this topic. There are many excellent books on Feng Shui, plant energy, and creating harmonious living spaces. The more you learn, the more equipped you'll be to make good choices for your unique situation. Some resources I particularly recommend include classical Feng Shui texts, books on the symbolism of flowers across different cultures, and guides specifically about using plants in Feng Shui practice. Ninth, be patient with yourself and the process. You don't need to transform your entire space overnight. Feng Shui is about gradual improvement, about moving consistently in a positive direction rather than achieving instant perfection. Each small change you make contributes to the overall shift. Trust the process and give it time to work. And 10th, share what you learn. If you notice positive changes from applying these principles, tell your friends and family, not in a preachy or superior way, but simply by sharing your experience. You might help someone else who's been struggling with persistent problems without realizing their environment might be contributing. The more people who understand these principles and apply them, the more harmonious and supportive our collective living spaces become. A word about cultural context and personal belief. Before we conclude, I want to address something important. The information I've shared today draws heavily on East Asian Feng Shui traditions and cultural symbolism. These are the traditions I've studied and practiced for over 3 decades, and I find them incredibly valuable and effective. But I also recognize that not everyone comes from or resonates with these cultural frameworks. If you're from a different cultural background, you might have different associations with these flowers. In your tradition, a flower I've described as problematic might have positive meanings, or flowers I haven't mentioned might carry warnings in your culture. This is completely valid. Cultural and regional differences in plant symbolism are real and significant. My suggestion is to use what I've shared as a starting point for thinking about flower energy, but also to explore your own cultural traditions. Talk to elders in your community about traditional beliefs regarding plants and flowers. Research the folklore and wisdom traditions of your ancestors. You might find perspectives that differ from what I've presented, and that's okay. The goal isn't to impose one cultural framework on everyone, but to encourage awareness of how flowers and plants affect our spaces energetically. Similarly, your personal belief system matters. Some people are very comfortable with the idea of energy, qi, yin and yang, and other metaphysical concepts. Others prefer to think in more psychological or aesthetic terms. You don't have to adopt any particular belief system to benefit from being more intentional about the flowers in your home. If spiritual or energetic language doesn't resonate with you, think of it in terms of psychological association and environmental psychology. The flowers we surround ourselves with influence our mood and mindset through learned associations, color psychology, fragrance effects on the nervous system, and symbolic meanings embedded in our cultural consciousness. The mechanism might be different than what traditional Feng Shui proposes, but the practical effects are similar. The point is to be thoughtful and intentional about your choices, to recognize that your environment affects you, and to take active steps to create a space that supports your well-being. However you conceptualize the process, the practical benefits remain. Conclusion: your home, your choice, your energy. And so we've reached the end of our journey through these 10 flowers and the energies they carry. We've talked about yellow chrysanthemums and their heavy associations with death and farewell. We've explored camellias with their cold, stagnant energy and sudden, ominous way of falling. We've discussed lilacs and their twilight, disorienting influence. We've examined poppies and their soft but persistent drain on vitality. We've looked at angel's trumpet with its toxic properties and downward pulling energy. We've considered night-blooming jasmine and its yin-intensifying effects. We've talked about apricot blossoms and their sensitivity to energetic imbalance. We've explored black roses and their absorptive, disconnecting nature. We've discussed red spider lilies and their pure yin energy of eternal separation. And we've looked at dandelions and their inability to gather or maintain stable energy. Each of these flowers, in its own way, carries energy that can disrupt the harmony of a living space. Not because they're evil or cursed, but simply because their energetic signatures are incompatible with what we need in our homes. We need spaces that feel alive, warm, connected, stable, and supportive. When we fill those spaces with flowers that carry heavy yin energy, associations with endings and loss, toxic influences, or scattered instability, we create energetic challenges for ourselves and our families. But here's the beautiful thing. Now that you know this, you have choice. You're not a passive victim of your environment anymore. You're an active creator of your living space. You get to decide what energy you invite in and what energy you keep out. You get to choose flowers and plants that support your goals, your relationships, your health, and your prosperity, rather than undermining them. And please remember, this is not about fear. I'm not trying to scare you or make you paranoid about the flowers in your garden. What I'm offering is awareness, information, and tools. With awareness, you can make better choices. With information, you can understand why certain patterns might be showing up in your life. With tools, you can actively create positive change. Your home should be your sanctuary. It should be a place where you feel safe, supported, nourished, and able to be fully yourself. Every element in that space should contribute positively to that goal. When something isn't serving you, when something is creating energetic drag or disruption, you have every right and every reason to change it. So I invite you now to take what you've learned and put it into practice. Start with one small change. Remove one flower that's been bothering you or that you now recognize might be contributing to problems. Replace it with something that carries better energy. Notice the difference. Let that positive change motivate you to continue improving your space. And as you do this work, remember to set your intention clearly. You might want to leave a comment right now with an affirmation like, "I choose to surround myself only with flowers and plants that support my highest good and the well-being of my family." Or, "I create a home filled with vibrant, life-affirming energy that attracts peace and prosperity." Whatever words feel right to you, speak them, write them, send that intention out into the universe. Because here's what I've learned over 30 years of practicing and teaching Feng Shui. The universe responds to clear intention backed by consistent action. When you set a clear intention to create a harmonious, supportive living space, and then you back that intention up with practical actions like choosing beneficial flowers and removing problematic ones, change happens. Sometimes quickly, sometimes gradually, but it happens. I've seen it thousands of times. Families who make these changes report better sleep, fewer arguments, improved health, better financial flow, more opportunities appearing, relationships deepening. Not because of magic or supernatural intervention, but because they've removed energetic obstacles and created space for good things to flow more freely. Now, before you go, I want to ask you something from the heart. If what I've shared with you today resonated with you, if something I said sparked a light of recognition inside you, if you felt that little flutter of excitement thinking about the possibilities for your own home and your own life, would you do me a small favor? Would you take just 2 seconds to click that like button right now? That simple click tells me that this message is reaching the right people, that this wisdom is landing where it needs to land, and it helps this video reach even more people who need to hear these teachings. People who are ready for change, people who are searching for practical ways to invite more prosperity and harmony into their lives. Every like, every comment, every share sends this knowledge further out into the world. And honestly, that's what this is all about. Not just transforming one life, but creating ripples of positive change that touch families, communities, and beyond. So if this video has given you value, if you've learned something useful, if you feel inspired to take action, please hit that like button. Drop a comment below sharing which prosperity plant you're most excited to bring into your home. Tell me if you already have a money tree and how it's working for you. Share your experiences, ask your questions. Let's create a conversation. Because when we share our journeys with each other, when we support each other in creating abundant, harmonious lives, we all rise together. Your engagement truly matters, and I'm so grateful for your support. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for being open to these ideas, for considering how your environment might be affecting you, and for being willing to make positive changes. The fact that you've watched this entire video tells me that you're someone who takes responsibility for your life and your well-being. You're not waiting for someone else to fix things for you. You're actively seeking knowledge and taking action. That's powerful, and it will serve you well not just with flower choices, but in every area of your life. May your home be filled with vibrant, life-affirming energy. May the flowers you choose bring you joy, beauty, and genuine support for all your goals and dreams. May you and your family thrive in a space that truly nourishes your body, mind, and spirit. And may the wisdom of Feng Shui continue to guide you toward greater harmony, prosperity, and peace in all aspects of your life. Until next time, stay mindful, stay intentional, and remember that you have the power to create the life and the home you truly desire. One conscious choice at a time, one flower at a time, one positive change at a time. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and you've already taken that step today by gaining this knowledge. Now go forward and apply it. Your best life is waiting for you. Thank you and blessings to you and your home.